for the county's food partnerships. And my name is Sarah Davis. I work for Food Matters, and together with the Soil Association and Sustain, we oversee the Sustainable Food Places programme across the UK. I'm going to be co-hosting this webinar today with Hannah Fenton, who set up Good Food Oxford and now works for Sustain. Hi Hannah. She's going to be discussing her work in Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire, as well as introducing our speakers today. Just to say, we have 1 hour and 15 minutes. And if people could keep their microphones on mute, that would be helpful, unless they're presenting or asking a question. And to use Speaker View, this is a Zoom meeting webinar, so use Speaker View to get the best view. We're also going to be recording this webinar, and I will email everybody with a copy of the recording later on today. So if you want to listen rather than make notes, that's fine. We're also going to be using the chat function, so if you want to introduce yourselves on the chat, share links or comments, ask questions, that would be really helpful. And the format of the webinar, I'm just going to start with a bit of an introduction to Sustainable Food Places and the county's programme. I'm then going to hand over to Hannah, who's going to discuss her own work and then introduce the 3 speakers that we have. So we're really lucky today to be joined by 3 speakers. So from Leicestershire, we have Gavin Fletcher, who's the Sustainable Food Partnership Coordinator there. From Durham, we have Hannah Murray-Leslie from Food Durham. And from Gloucestershire, we have Tamsin Howard-Beck, who describes herself as the chief doer at Boom Circle. And this will be followed, after the presenters have finished, there'll be a question and answer session, which is going to be chaired by Ben Messer, my colleague at Food Matters. Hi, Ben. And if you would like to obviously ask questions in the chat during the presenters, while they're presenting, that's fine. There's also an opportunity, if people wish, to appear on screen to ask their question in person. So if you wish to do that, when you're writing your question in the chat, I just ask people to write yes at the end of their question, and then Ben can know that you're prepared to share your screen and actually appear as part of the webinar. That would be great, thank you. The final part of the webinar, just at the end, we are going to look at what the future support needs are as well for counties going forward as part of this programme. So, sorry, I'm just going to share my screen. Sorry, I've just had to, sorry, the slides have gone slightly wrong. Yeah, let's go to the top. Okay, so Sustainable Food Places, like I said, it's a partnership programme run across the country, and the ambition of Sustainable Food Places is to make healthy and sustainable food the defining characteristic of where people live. And this is a programme that's been running, focusing on cities initially since 2013. So for the last 6 years or so, we've been working across the UK to support the development of cross-sectoral food partnerships in cities, to support the establishment and maintain those partnerships with partners coming together from across the food system and from across the public, private and voluntary and community sectors as well. And at the core of this is the development of a food strategy, which Ben and myself support sustainable food partnerships in creating in a very participative way. And we use a framework for action which has 6 key issues. I'm using these screenshots from the Sustainable Food Places website. So if you are new to Sustainable Food Places, I really would recommend that you go visit our website. There's a huge amount of information on there. You'll get information on a lot of the different campaigns that we run, the awards that are available, and the different members that are already part of the network. And on this particular page here, you can see the 6 key issues that we focus on when we're working with sustainable food places. So governance and strategy, we're looking predominantly at the development of a robust food partnership. Good food movement focuses on community engagement and raising public awareness. Healthy food for all, so a lot of our work also covers the angle on food poverty and diet related ill health. The local food economy, so working with local businesses. Catering and procurement, that's looking at hospital food, school food, and large-scale caterers. And food from the planet, that's looking at, for example, like food waste and the carbon impacts of food. So have a good look around our website. There's a huge amount of information up there. We're also very happy to be contacted if you want to get in touch to have a discussion. So over the last 6 years, we've been cultivating our membership and predominantly been in cities up until now. We've got over 50 members, which you can see listed here on the website. And if you look closely, you'll realise that actually they're not all cities. And what we've been realising as we've been progressing with this programme is that we're increasingly getting inquiries from places, from districts or from counties, from towns even, who are all keen to take action around sustainable food in an integrated way. So with a bit of reflection on this and some consultation that we did, as we move forward now with a new round of funding from the lottery and from the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, we're now able to open up our programme beyond cities and start seeing what's possible and what will it look like if we have a whole range of different places engaging. So that's the sort of context for the beginning of the counties programme now. So the counties programme, it is England-wide. There is actually a parallel piece of work. I know that we're joined here today by quite a few people from Northern Ireland, from Scotland and from Wales. So just to point out, there is a parallel programme which is in operation in the devolved nations, which is going to be offering a slightly similar set of support and grants to the counties programme. So the counties programme that we're talking about today is England-wide, and at the core of it, the real value of the network is the members. It's people who, like yourselves, who are potentially working at a county level to bring together partners. So what we're really keen to do is develop a cohort of county members of sustainable food places. And the focus will be on sharing approaches and listening to what's happening already at a county level, setting up and convening spaces for networking, and also co-designing the Sustainable Food Places programme, so that it'll be, we're interested to ask questions about what the Sustainable Places Award scheme needs to look like for counties. What does a bronze award look like if you're a county? And what do the membership criteria need to be to make it relevant and accessible for counties? So we're very keen to work with you in a shared space to create what becomes the counties programme. I'm not here to sort of make lots of announcements today about what it is. It's emerging, if you like. So as a member of Sustainable Food Places, counties will be able to take part in our national campaigns like Veg Cities and Sugar Smart. They'll be able to apply for awards as part of the Sustainable Food Places programme, and there are a number of grants that are available as well. And the counties grants that are specific to this programme, so we're looking at potentially 2 different grants. We're still working on the details of these, so we're not actually announcing these today, but we do expect them to be announced this autumn. So firstly, the development grant is a small grant which is really aimed at very early stage partnerships. So it's people just at the very beginning of pulling together the stakeholders in their counties. And the coordinator grant, which we hope to follow on from that, which will be next summer 2021, the focus of that is a slightly longer grant for the ongoing coordination of county food partnerships. Just one other area of the website that I wanted to draw your attention to. So if you are at the beginning of setting out, thinking about creating a food partnership at a county's level, if you look at our website under the resources section, you'll find within the governance theme, there's a toolkit on food partnerships and strategies with a whole range of different guides and tools that are accessible, hopefully very helpful for you, right from the very beginnings of engaging stakeholders in steering groups through to creating your vision, a work plan, and looking at some of the sort of issues around terms of reference and food systems mapping, etc. So there's a lot of useful information there. And also, as I said, I'm very happy to answer questions. If people want to get in touch with me by email with initial inquiries, that's fine. I'll share my email in the chat. It's sarah@foodmatters.org. So I'll share that in the chat. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Hannah, who's going to introduce her work in Buckinghamshire and the 3 speakers that we have today. Thanks.
Hello everyone, my name is Hannah and this is me, Hannah Fenton, and this is me at my husband's apple juice stall at the farmers market in East Oxford. I've got connections to both Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire. I grew up in Buckinghamshire and I now live in Oxford. And I founded and ran Good Food Oxford for about 5 years. I'm now working for Sustain, funded by the Rothschild Foundation, looking at the need for a food partnership in Buckinghamshire. So from a county's point of view, we're at an early stage for both Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire. And so I'm really here to learn from others, and Sarah and I are really pleased to be able to bring these speakers together and to really talk about the details of running a county-wide food partnership. Now, just to go back to why we're here, why do we need a food partnership? Well, I always say food is a system, and if any part goes wrong in that system, other parts are affected. So large players such as supermarkets have a large voice and representation nationally, but smaller players can have a big impact. So what I talk about is collective impact, and collective impact is the commitment of a group of important actors from different sectors to a common agenda for solving a specific social problem. Or in other words, Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So this is Good Food Oxford. Ooh. Good Food Oxford is a cross-sector partnership. So that's one of the aspects of collective impact. And we have around 140 network members, including food and farming businesses, cafes, restaurants, food processors and so on, retailers, charities and community groups and local authorities. They've all signed the Good Food Charter that you'll see in the middle there, which is our vision for a better food system for Oxford. And they've all made a pledge for what they're doing to move us towards that vision. And these are specific measurable actions that they're taking. So our partnership includes Oxford City Council, Oxfordshire County Council, Compass Group, Oxford University, Oxford Brookes University, the Oxford Hub, the Lord Mayor of Oxford and Riverford Organic Oxfordshire. We've got quite a diverse membership. As Sarah mentioned, we're part of the National Network of Sustainable Food Places, formerly called Cities, and now the coverage of those places is about 1/3 of the population, so it's quite widespread. And, you know, we bandy around this term sustainable all the time, but just a reminder of what that really means. From my point of view, I like this from the European Sustainable Development Week. A sustainable food system is one where the long-term outcomes are positive for health and well-being, environment and economy. So Sarah spoke about the 6 key issues which are important to guide work, and you know, true partnerships need to be working on all of these issues, I would say, making progress. But essentially, we can do so much more in partnership across the whole food system than we could achieve if we were working in isolation. So the way we do that at Good Food Oxford, we don't just deliver projects, we do this supporting collective impact. We try to work under all of these headings, not just project delivery. So from vision and strategy to supporting others to work together, measuring progress against agreed criteria, public will and public events, policy advances that improve the environment in which our food businesses, charities and community groups and individuals can access and enjoy food, and then getting funding not just to us but to our network members and to the wider food system locally. So, I mean, the big question today is about what's the story so far, and how does this county approach develop? So we started Good Food Oxford in December 2013. In 2014, there was a lot of activity forming a steering group, and we really clearly focused on the Oxford brand, Good Food Oxford, and developed the charter that you saw in an earlier slide. We then secured 2 years of initiation funding from a benevolent individual through a trust, the Fund for Sankalpa, and that's when I came in, and it's very much talking about Oxford's food system. How do we feed everyone in Oxford? Probably just out of necessity. My resources were stretched and I wanted to really focus my mind, but that Oxford question necessarily involves Oxfordshire. Partly because we've got some fantastic local producers in Oxfordshire, and we can source from some of them. It would be nice to be able to source more local produce. So on the basis of all the activity, Oxford achieved a Bronze Award in 2018, which evidenced the activity of about 150 organisations and community groups working across the network. And at that moment, I had a kind of what next moment. And we went through the process of starting to hand over to the new manager, Fiona. So, what we realised was that so much in Oxford is determined Oxfordshire wide. So this is a 2-tier local authority. We have the county council, and then we have the district councils, but a lot of the activity is run at a county level. So the schools, public health, there's climate change agenda, waste and all that kind of thing. That's all county wide. And so we realised that the next stage of change has to encompass the county, but the districts are very distinct. So the real kind of crunch point came with coronavirus. Fiona, our new manager, started at the start of March, and 3 weeks into her new role, the coronavirus crisis hit. And this was a desperate moment, but a moment of collaboration and coordination across particularly food access and people struggling to make ends meet and to get enough food in. And it became even clearer that we needed to work Oxfordshire wide. I mean, just not fair that if you're this side of a city boundary, then you've got a food parcel and you've got a really well coordinated group of people working together, and on the other side it's not the same level of support. So we very quickly realised that a county-wide approach was the only real way to go. And so Fiona's been convening community food networks, one in each district, and we're starting work on a county-wide strategy. So at the moment we want to take Oxford to a silver Sustainable Food Places Award and Oxfordshire to bronze, and then kind of dovetail as we go along and hopefully go for gold together. So, as I say, very early stages of county-wide in Oxfordshire, and I really want to learn from others. So now I'm going to Buckinghamshire. So we've left Oxfordshire in Fiona's capable hands, and I started in Buckinghamshire at the start of January. This work funded by the Rothschild Foundation was meant to be, this is with Sustain, it was meant to be a research and consultation project about the need for a food partnership in Buckinghamshire. It very quickly became an action research project because 2 months in, coronavirus crisis hit. So talking about responding to shocks in the food system, that never became clearer than we've had recently with the coronavirus crisis. And so what I did is convene 2 emergency food response groups, one in Wickham and Aylesbury, and these are some of the members of those groups. So we've got 110 members across 2 groups. Each group had 12 meetings at height of the crisis. It started off weekly. They made masks, they sourced boxes, they moved food around, they cooked meals, they shared leafleting, they referred between each other. They commandeered a community bus to collect food and deliver it to the local informal food bank. They got to grips with government guidance, which was tricky and often changing. We worked on nutritional value, fed back to national government on the free school meal vouchers which weren't working properly, ran cooking classes and an online home growing project. So, you know, working together, taking a partnership approach really had an important and big impact in the height of the crisis. So Buckinghamshire context. Now, you know, poor Buckinghamshire Council, I mean, they've done a fantastic job, but no one would have thought that a movement to unitary authority would be the least of their worries on the 1st of April. But it was a two-tier local authority like Oxfordshire still is. And on the 1st of April, it moved to unitary local authority, Buckinghamshire Council. So there are 16 community boards clustered north, central and south to kind of enable that close working within the county. But we also have 150 town and parish councils. And as with Oxfordshire, much is done county-wide, and there's a lot of opportunity at a county level. So within 5 years, the county is going to have to publish a local plan. There's a new health and wellbeing strategy just being consulted on. The healthy eating strategy will need to be refreshed. The whole system approach to obesity is coming in. There's the local enterprise partnership working on the economy side of things, and the climate emergency declaration is county-wide, and food is an important part of that, both in terms of growing, eating and waste. So, you know, there is a really great opportunity there to work county-wide, whilst recognising that there's this incredibly unique identity of the countryside of Buckinghamshire. It's very different, the Chiltern Hills versus Aylesbury Vale, and each of the market towns is unique. You know, Buckingham is very different from Wickham, is very different from Marlow, and so on and so on. And, you know, a real important thing to bear in mind here in terms of collaboration and participatory working is, where is people's sense of place? And I think most people in Buckinghamshire would probably say they came from their town rather than from Buckinghamshire as a whole. But as I say, there's a lot that can be done on a county level. So yes, here's just a visual view. This is from the National Trust of the difference between the Chilterns and Aylesbury Vale. So the Chilterns is rolling chalk hills and beech woods, and Aylesbury Vale is much more fertile and clearly a valley. So yes, even in terms of the you know, the ecosystem, the environment, there's a huge difference. So what was this consultation about? Well, we ran a survey, focus groups and summits all had to be online. We had a good number of survey responses, and a lot of them saw that there was a need for a partnership. And then within our focus groups and summit attendees, everyone who attended thought that a partnership across the county would be a good idea. So the other part that I've been doing over this consultation period is gathering background data about what the situation is at the moment in Buckinghamshire and the kind of food activity that's happening to address any of those issues. And I'm about to publish a report at the end of October, and you know, what comes out clearly for me is diversity. So there's a real difference between the rural and the urban life in Buckinghamshire. And you know, there's sometimes a disconnect between those, and people want more connection. It's a very affluent county, but there's very deprived small areas in Buckinghamshire. We need to address that. There are some businesses which are striving recently, and some that have really struggled or failed due to coronavirus. And you know, there's some real economic issues coming up as we speak. And you know, some of our ecosystems are flourishing. We've got ancient woodlands, and some of them are incredibly overburdened, so runoff from chalk streams and the onslaught of HS2. And you know, there's a real need for equity and opportunities across the county to make a difference to the kind of food that we're eating and producing. So I would say that for me, there's a real challenge of working county-wide with a large population, very rural, with you know, some real conurbations, focus within the towns, and such distinct identities and challenges between those places. And so that's my question at the moment. You know, I want to learn from others about what their experiences of working at the county are, what their challenges are, and how they've managed to address those so far. So I'm going to hand over to the three speakers and then there'll be a chance to ask questions. Please put your questions in the chat. If you're okay to ask your question out loud, then put yes after the question. And that means that Ben may ask you to ask your question. And so, first of all, I'd like to hand over to Gavin Fletcher from Leicestershire.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Let me just share my screen. Excellent. Hopefully you can all see that. Good. Thanks for that introduction, Hannah. That was really useful. There's a number of bits that correspond to some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about as well. So my name is Gavin Fletcher. I'm the Sustainable Food Partnership Coordinator at Leicestershire County Council. I'm based in public health. I've been in post for 2.5 years, but Leicestershire County Council has been working towards sustainable food systems work for about 3.5 years. And this is on the back of a long-running Food for Life commission. As Hannah was saying with Oxfordshire, Leicestershire is a two-tier local authority, although there are moves to turn it into a unitary, and I'll pick up some of the difficulties that creates as we go through. So if I should, as I said, we've been working on this for a bit. I've been involved for 2.5 years, and when we started out with kind of 2 parallel bits of work. And it's kind of related to the two-tier authority part. So firstly, a Leicestershire County Council more strategic part of a food plan. So looking at departmental action, how departments work together, where food impacts on different departments. That sort of place leadership element. So how do we strategically work towards food systems change, who we link to strategically, so what sort of partners we need to work with, for example, the NFU or the Leicester and Leicestershire Enterprise Partnership, and then where there are necessary links to other strategies in the County Council. And then the other aspect was the localities and the practical aspects of sustainable food work. And we started that bit by inviting expressions of interest from districts and boroughs to pilot an approach to local food work. We had Melton Borough Council and Harborough District Council who put themselves forward. And so the localities and the practical work was more focused on getting that district and borough representation, looking at how we get external partners involved, both in terms of representation but also action on the ground. So we were looking for pilot projects that we could take forward, and then the necessary community and third sector input as part of that. I think as we've moved forward with this sort of parallel work, we've found some difficulties with how it actually works on the ground. And so part of that is that with the Leicestershire work, we were, I suppose, managing the sustainable food element, as well as trying to develop internal policy and projects. And essentially we had too many people trying to do too much stuff in one place. So it was quite unwieldy. The second aspect was that we didn't really have enough external representation. It wasn't strong enough within the work that the county was doing. And so what we're now working on, and this is stuff that we're developing now, is we're looking at how we evolve the structure to try and reflect what seems to work locally. And so we're working more towards a setup where we have an internal county steering group, which still looks at progressing projects and internal collaboration on food across departments, but it's more focused on the doing. And so it's representatives from the different departments across the county council, as well as key people like Jackie, who runs the school meal service. And then we have an external stakeholder group, which obviously will be people and organisations looking at advising projects, developing projects, that local sounding board, and then both of those feeding into a much smaller management group. So a couple of county council sponsors, so one from public health, one from the environment team, and then some external representation. So hopefully a slimmer but more representative management group with those two key groups that are steering and driving work. What I think we've found through this so far in terms of challenges and opportunities with rural and county work is that the challenges are really the traditional ones that you would see through some of the longer standing members of Sustainable Food Places, but amplified with a two-tier, within the two tiers or by the two tiers really. So you've got this internal within Leicestershire County Council, the problem of ownership and strategy, and how you sort of add food onto somebody's already existing job. And then you've got the things of, you know, everybody's got time pressures, but I think with scale and spread within rural geographies and within the county context, as Hannah mentioned with Buckinghamshire, these are big geographies with very different places and very different needs, and you've got this this problem, this challenge of how to set something at a county level, but then reflect what happens on a local level. And then obviously you've got the challenge of politics, which, as I mentioned, if the county is saying we want to be unitary and the districts are saying we don't, you know, there's very different sort of political things going on. There are loads of really interesting opportunities with rural and county though. Again, ownership, external ownership, and creating new place leaders. That's common to more urban landscapes as well. But I think where the rural and county brings an extra element is with how you bring some of these whole systems examples and bring some of the food production and growing and farming into sustainable food places conversation. In counties, in rural landscapes, food is closer to people. People are closer to, have closer links to farming. And also as an authority, Leicestershire County Council is closer to land managers. Not only do we own farms, we also have more of a strategic interest in land. So for example, Leicestershire is working on a natural capital strategy. We have a regulatory function with farms and producers. And then we have a Leicestershire Rural Partnership, which has key partners like Brooksby Agricultural College, the Allerton Project, the NFU. And so I think there's a real potential to bring all of that into the Sustainable Food Places work. An example of some of the work that we have going on in Leicestershire is with Stanford Hall Community Supported Agriculture. It's quite a traditional community supported agriculture scheme working in South Leicestershire, but Leicestershire County Council works closely with it. So we have, they sell food into the school meal service, and as part of that we work with them within their food system, within their food growing season. So we work with them really early to plan our menus around what they are going to be producing and when, so that we can make best use of their produce, but also so the CSA can grow to order for the school meal service. In terms of sustainable food places and what I think might help with the county and the rural aspects of new members, I think there's potentially a need for some more specific information, and I'm particularly thinking around some of the different economic arguments around food production and agriculture and how we bring that into some of the information that we have available. I think there's a need to look at how we focus on some of the more rural issues, and particularly we can link in with the work that the Food Farming and Countryside Commission did. They had some really interesting information linked to rural communities around housing and jobs. And then I think there might be a need to look at having some form of a county conference or a county part of the SFP conference, partly so that we can bring in some of those more rural focused organisations like the NFU and ACRE, but also so that we can start looking at how we pull out some of the case studies and examples, and maybe just start to tweak some of the language, which can still be quite urban focused. Obviously, there are still urban members of SFP, so the urban language is still needs to be in there, but I think we need to also have some of the more rural and county language so that we're representing people more. So that's all I've got for now. So it's back to Hannah. I'll stop sharing my screen.
That's super stuff. Thank you so much, Gavin. And it's really great to see, you know, we're not alone. Those challenges and opportunities look really familiar. So I'm going to hand over to Hannah Murray-Leslie from County Durham.
Hello. I hope you can see my slideshow there. Great. So I'm Hannah. I work for Food Durham, the County Durham Food Partnership, and alongside Peter Sampson, who's also here and might answer some of the questions in the chat. I'm just having a little moment with my screen share thing. I do apologise. If I click now, does it go onto page 2?
And you just need to go from beginning in the top left. That's it. Yeah. That's
it. Sorry, I thought I clicked on that. I do apologise, everybody. Right, here we go. So, County Durham, we are a large unitary authority. We've got a very diverse geography. So to the west, we've got the North Pennines, area of outstanding natural beauty, and to the east, we've got a heritage coastline. We've got the beautiful small Durham city in the middle, and also a really dispersed population. So they tend to live in rural or ex-mining settlements. And that issue that people have already mentioned about sort of local identity, that's really strong in County Durham as well. We do have some sort of pockets of affluence, but I'd say more significantly are the high levels of deprivation. Universal credit's been rolled out. Obviously the COVID pandemic has created a really high demand for emergency food provision. But we also have a long and proud history of collective action and sort of community getting on with it, really. Health statistics are poor. We've got a lot of long-term health problems. Childhood obesity is well above the national average. And lots of our kind of settlements are struggling in the sense that they haven't got access to affordable fresh food sort of on their doorstep. Also, our local food economy isn't massively developed. We do have some brilliant small producers, but they tend to sell right across the region because the markets are all over, and there's just not the sort of the volume really to support that level of development at the moment. So issues really around infrastructure and sort of the geographical distances that people are having to travel to access local food. So Food Durham is, we've existed formally since 2014, and we're not actually like a legal entity of our own. We're hosted by an infrastructure support charity, Durham Community Action. We've got 2 food and growing coordinators, that's myself and Peter, and we both, well, I work 4 days, he works 3 days a week. This slide is just a quick timeline to show the kind of key events in the development of our food partnership. We were working for some time before we applied for our Bronze Award, and that was really about wanting to establish a partnership and a strategy that was driven by local need, rather than you know, looking to an external model that you might impose on your own area, kind of a thing. It reflects the time it takes to build the relationships needed to embed a food partnership and the constantly changing nature of the work. And I think within a large county, that is an issue just in terms of building those relationships. Simon here on the right, he's the chair of our advisory board, so he's a cheesemaker, so I've got him holding the partnership structure there. But basically, we've got the advisory board. There's quite a broad representation on there from a strong representation from Durham County Council, but also the NFU, NHS, Visit County Durham, the Enterprise Agency, Citizens Advice Bureau, and so on. So that's groups works quite well in terms of bringing people together who wouldn't normally connect, actually. We also have some themed subgroups, some of which we run ourselves, and some of which actually belong to the County Council, like the Healthy Weight Alliance and so on, that we feed into. This is just, I just sort of lobbed a load of stuff into a bit of a mind map to give a picture of how we've sort of split up or organised really some of our current activity. We've been carrying out a refresh of our local sustainable food strategy, and we've identified kind of 4 key areas of activity and things spreading out from those. We beyond those sort of headlines really, there's just loads of other relationships and there's loads of other things happening, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge we have as a food partnership, is keeping track of all the stuff that's happening and being the connectors between it all. I was talking with Peter about this the other day, and he's came up with the image of little spiders scurrying around on a massive great web, and that's kind of what it feels like sometimes, that not everybody who's involved in food partnership activity kind of thinks of it as being their core, thinks that's what they're doing. We're the ones that often have to draw that out of them, and so, you know, it feels like a really valuable role. Actually, it's quite hard, but it's really useful, I think, because what it then does is enables people to start to think about the broader issues, and it's just that space for having those conversations about how, you know, if you happen to be working in economic development or something like that, you know, what the links are with the other areas of food partnership work. So challenges of the challenge is the size of it and the scale of it, I suppose, and the complex nature of it, and the fact that we don't deliver a huge amount of work directly ourselves, but the opportunities, the benefits, you know, partnership working brings so much to the table. So it's just, it can be a bit messy, and it can be definitely time consuming, but we do find that people are really wanting to have those conversations, and they enjoy having those conversations. And B, it really helps us as coordinators to be able to connect with all of these different sort of elements within the food system and try and bring it all together. What we think, you know, one of the key tricks, obviously Durham County Council, that's 16,000 employees, something like that, so it is large. It's got a massive influence in the county, so we have found that working closely with them to sort of influence strategy, like Hannah mentioned, I think, about the climate action plan, and, you know, so sort of sustainable procurement policies and things like that, that actually, it's kind of slow, but it has quite a significant impact in the longer term. So for us, it's all about building relationships, and so yes, you know, there's a lot of that to do, and reminding people that they are sort of part of the food partnership almost, and going out and finding them, kind of earning your place at their table, if you like, is really key to it all. I think for a county as opposed to a city, I don't know, I suppose there's a scale thing, but it's also to do with how spread out everything is, how disconnected, and it's for a food partnership to kind of have that influence and draw people in. I think that's our goal, that's what we're working to, but I'm not quite sure that we've got there yet. You asked about what would help more from SFP. I took a typically County Durham approach, which is we're just getting on with it on our own. Obviously we're not, but we really appreciate the networking opportunities. We love to take part in the events, to learn from other people and hear about the different ways. And I think that's one of the major strengths of SFP, is really the diversity within it. There isn't a one size fits all, and I think it's quite easy to sometimes look at other food partnerships and think, why haven't I got that? Why haven't we managed to do this? And one of the things I think SFP is good at, and I encourage them to continue with, is celebrating the achievements in whatever form they are, because it's a diverse network of partnerships, and everyone's kind of working to the best of their ability, really. We find the awards programme, we're working towards silver. We found that quite useful, really, to kind of, I guess, compare our own sort of strategic priorities, if you like, against, make sure that kind of we're meshing in with those. It adds a different level of structure, and also a bit of core funding, which I can't believe I've got through a whole presentation and not mentioned the funding word, but it's really important. SFP support for NESFA work. So NESFA is a very new thing we're doing in the North East. It's the North East Sustainable Food Alliance. And at the moment, Ben Messer's helping us quite a lot with that and facilitating some of our meetings, so that we're basically working with Middlesbrough and Newcastle Food Partnerships to identify some project activity that really needs to happen on a regional level as opposed to on a local level. So that's been really interesting, not just because of the potential for further development, but also some of the techniques, the facilitation techniques and software and things that we're learning about are kind of the things that we can then use in our own networks. We're shortly going to launch a community good food network, which is about bringing in the more grassroots projects, particularly sort of mutual aid groups that have sprung up and emergency food providers and so on, because we're well aware that people are absolutely, doing amazing things. We don't know the half of it, and I don't think there's anything necessarily much connecting them within a food context. So we're hopeful that that's going to be another layer to our engagement with communities. Yeah, so the encouragement and validation, I've probably mentioned that a little bit. I don't know. It can just feel very. You can feel a little bit isolated when you're working in a county. Like, you do things. I mean, this is not me personally, but Food Durham sort of instigated the Durham County Council's sustainable local food procurement policy, and it's probable that nobody within Durham County Council really knows that that's the case, and we're not brilliant at kind of banging our own drum and blowing our own trumpet and stuff. It doesn't particularly interest us in a lot of respects, but there is a feeling that you're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and so having that acknowledged actually within a national context is actually really important for us in terms of motivation and just a bit of a pat on the back. The national campaigns we've been involved in for quite a while. I think we were one of the first 5-star fish cities, sustainable fish cities, and actually that's one thing that relates a little bit to Gavin's work, and actually to Hannah's. That's probably the one thing that's only been for Durham City, because at the time it was just impossible, I think, to really get that campaign off the ground across the whole county, partly because there weren't that many. If you think about trying to connect all of the fish retailers and restaurants and serving fish and everybody to try and sign up to a sustainable fish pledge, you know, it's a bit of a mind melt. So that really only belongs to the city, but the other campaigns we've been working across the county, and they actually, I think, work really well on that basis, particularly when you've got the buy-in from local authority.
Hannah, can I just interrupt? Really sorry, we're almost out of time.
That's all. That's all.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was really interesting.
Super stuff. Yeah, thank you so much, Hannah. Yeah, really interesting that it's just all built on relationships and being the connector, and how it is trickier to do that on the county scale. But yes, some great work that you've been doing. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Tamsin Harrod-Beck from Gloucestershire.
Great, thanks, Hannah. I'm just sharing my screen now. Can everyone see that okay? Cool, good job. Okay, so I'm Tamsin Harrod-Beck, and I'm going to be talking about some of the work I have been leading in Gloucestershire, establishing a food strategy. Just listening to some of you guys talk, yeah, all that detail, all those opportunities, all those challenges, I share those. I'm not necessarily going to go into the details of my presentation. And I've taken quite a different approach in Gloucestershire. I think the difference being I'm an independent person. I'm not hosted by anyone, and it sort of started as a passion project on yeah, from me. So slightly different setup. So yeah, I will talk about the structure of the group, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and how we established ourselves. Is my presentation moving on? Doesn't seem to be. No. Maybe I can, let me share my screen again. Sorry, I'm doing the messy share now, Hannah. I know you coached me through this before, but is that going on? That better? Okay, cool. So a bit about me. Boom Circle exists to activate change and be a leader in the good food revolution. And what does that mean? I want to help widely accelerate the creation of trusted regional food systems that put the healthiest possible food on people's plate. I coordinate local organisations. I help find evidence of what works, help people get access to funding, and most importantly, help regional stakeholders understand the value of food and farming in their region, which I think is a massive barrier. So those are the 4 key barriers that I'm trying to address and try and help people with. In terms of the Gloucestershire Food Strategy Group, so it's a grassroots movement led by me, and that really started with a presentation to the Agri-Food and Rural Group under the Local Enterprise Partnership in July 2017. And that presentation touched on everything that Sarah spoke about of those 6 key areas that were Sustainable Food Cities is focusing on. And loosely, the Gloucestershire Food Strategy Group has kept in that structure and under the LEP. Fast forward 3 years later, and we're an informal group of about 15 organisations, similar collection of companies and organisations as other people, and essentially this group has developed a consensus of what Gloucestershire should be focusing on in terms of food and farming. As I said, it's informal. We meet quarterly, ideally organised by me, and the contact is much more frequent when it comes to specific projects. It's also worth saying that, and I'm happy to share all my detail around funding and who's funded this. Essentially, it's been part funded, but really it's half me working my arse off for free over 3 years, and half funded at a really horrible cheap day rate. So what is the consensus that this group's come to? And essentially a shared vision, and it's to create a healthy circular economy in food and farming that cools the climate, builds natural capital, and reduces food-related illness for the benefit of people, businesses, for our people, businesses, and nature. So there's 3 main focus areas. You'll be familiar with this stuff. The first is around transforming demand, and that's focusing specifically on public procurement within Gloucestershire. The second is around food culture. to help people live a happier and healthier life with much more awareness and connection to food and farming in the region. And then the third piece, which people have touched on, is the food and farming transition within Gloucestershire. So how do we help our farmers have prosperous, sustainable businesses, but also respond to the climate emergency and activate the nature recovery that they need to? So there's this 50% of the land in Gloucestershire is under agricultural activity. So we have to engage that group as a really important part of the strategy. The opportunities by organising across county, what opportunities have we had? These are just a few. Most importantly, we've secured £470,000 of funding to help progress the strategy, and that is the exciting part. Most of that is going to agroecological farming within the county over 3 years. So that's been a big win for us this year. We managed to get the food strategy into the local industrial strategy, which was no mean feat. That was a really, really difficult thing to do, but that hopefully means that there's some resource coming down in terms of R&D, research and development in the supply chain and in communities further down the line. We successfully became part of the Future Food Framework trial, which is around the Crown Commercial Service as changing the way it does public procurement. And I'm sure some of you are aware of this. And we're part of that trial, which basically gives us early access, our producers early access to about a £15 million, hopefully, public procurement market during that pilot and then national rollout. Also, we are in discussions with Gloucester County Council about some of their new economic development officers who are being recruited, having some of their resource directed to some of the food strategy work. So that's sort of current opportunities, and I'm looking forward. I know the Leicestershire Food Group mentioned this. Food and Farming Commission, we're hopefully going to link up with them, and we're having discussions about how we can come together in Gloucestershire. We aren't a sustainable food place, but hopefully that will change over the next 12 months. We've got some more opportunities for funding from 30 Percy. We have a link into the National Food Strategy. There's a guy in our group called Tom McMillan who advises Henry Dimbleby, and possibly there's a chance for us to be part of the COP26 conference, among other things. So my sort of challenge to you guys, or I guess, or not challenge, but thought, you know, what's on your doorstep? It's amazing what is on your doorstep, as I'm sure you all know, having organised some of the stuff already. It's truly amazing, and it's very exciting to work with everyone in the county. So some of the challenges, rather than list a bunch of challenges, I thought, what are the 3 things I would tell my 2017 self or share looking back? And the first one is get resourced properly. You know, it's a simple process. Find people who are interested in what you want to do, organize them, focus them strategically, get some funding. That's fairly simple, but it takes so much, as we know. I've got some detail there, you know, 2,000 emails, a whole month I had to spend on funding applications, 250 meetings, 40 presentations, many workshops in 1.5 years. It's a lot. So, you know, if you have budget in your projects, I'm happy to share some of the things I've learned and the mistakes I've gone through, so you don't have to do them yourself. Second thing I would say is to my 2017 self, I know it's not your skill set, but you need to spend half of your time on sales and marketing of what you're doing in this food partnership and 50% doing, because people don't get it. They don't understand the opportunities in food and farming. It's up to us to sell that and to market it. And that might not make us comfortable, but we have to get the value proposition right for such a huge array of audiences. And that's, I think, where the Sustainable Food Places can help. Making really compelling value propositions to all of the groups involved in these kinds of partnerships, that would have made my life 1,000 times easier over the last 3 years. And the third thing is, I've really just been thinking about this over the last week or so. Are you an architect or a mechanic? If you're a mechanic, you go in and tinker with some, you know, an existing thing, you know, a car. But as an architect, you are designing building a brand new thing. And I think perhaps sometimes we get confused, or I at least got confused in this space where, you know, we're actually innovators and early adopters. We're designing new systems, we're challenging people, and we want to find a new way. So trying to tinker sometimes with old systems or is maybe not always the right approach. So moment by moment, project by project, I've sort of tried to ask myself more and more, is this a place where I can create something new? Is this going to help us create something new? Or are we just wasting time trying to tinker with something that's old and proven over decades to not work? So yeah, having that sort of principle as an overarching principle. And as a final, I've got 30 seconds left, so I'm just going to do a quick plug. I'm launching some new products around helping people like yourselves and councils organise their sustainable food partnerships. Please get in touch. We've got some new products that I'm launching, and I'm happy to give you guys a discount along those lines. So there you go. That was a whiz through, but I've stuck to 10 minutes, Sarah.
Brilliant. So great, Tamsin, to hear. And gosh, I wish I'd had those 3 top tips for my past self. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really clear what you say about unlocking local strategies and how the opportunities come down through that, but how difficult that is and what it takes, and not to underestimate how much work that actually takes. But when you can unlock it, and Hannah talked about this in Durham, it can change everything, and that's amazing to get those kind of wins where you're literally changing one word of policy or something like that. So I really enjoy that distinct working, where some of your wins are about doing big public events and getting loads of people involved, and some of your wins are sort of 10 words in a policy. Yeah, thank you for that. So I get the privilege of asking the first question, which is great. So I am going to ask a question which I think all of us have touched on. You know, working at a county level, quite diverse actors, diverse landscapes, trying to hold all of it together, sometimes it feels like sand and sometimes it just falls through your fingers. Do you experience that or something different? How do you deal with it, and what would help you? And that's to any of the speakers, if you'd like to unmute.
Shall I go first then? It's yeah, I mean it is really difficult. I think sometimes you just have to put that to one side and go where the energy is to begin with. So I suppose my initial when I first started out, I was just going and speaking to lots of people, finding out what's happening on the ground. I knew quite a lot anyway already, but just from doing that, you start to pick out where the early adopters are and who's going to start working with you initially. And I think you know there's an element of just needing to build up a bit of credibility and a bit of momentum around the work. So that's, yeah, I think that was my approach, was to just ignore the scary scale and just start to pick a few people to start working with.
Find your allies. Thank you. Anyone else?
I would say absolutely. I get that feeling of what decisions have I made in my life that have brought me to this moment where I hate what I'm doing in this very moment because it's so frustrating and all that kind of stuff. However, so when you're feeling like the sand slipping through your fingers and things are too much and there's an awful amount of complexity that you have to keep as the one person who understands everything of the food system in your county, I would take comfort in nobody in the world, that any of the experts in my group that know of, have done this successfully. You know, we're all doing this for the first time, and so I think it's okay. Number one, it's okay to feel that way, and secondly, when I come back to what can you control. You know, if I'm trying to be if I'm thinking like an architect, and you think, am I in a space where I can actually build things, or am I in somebody else's house and I'm trying to stick something that they should be doing, and I can't control that. I think there's maybe a definition between what can you actually control and what is actually somebody else's job, and all you can do is try your best and say, please, can you do this? May I remind you, you need to do this, and then move on, and ultimately that thing will come back. It'll come back around, make no mistake.
Yeah, so we're pioneering this together, and you know, what do we need to work on now? Thank you.
I would just echo that and say it's worth celebrating the small things all the time and not worrying. You know, you have to be aware of the big picture, but don't sort of worry about it too much.
Yeah, taking a practical approach. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Ben. There are some questions in the chat.
Hi everybody, I'm going to make this quite quick because we're running out of time, but there's been some really interesting stuff going through chat, great comments. Carrie Buick, who's talking about Norfolk wanting to get things going. If you look at our map in SFP, there's a big gap over in the east there, so that's great news. There's a really lovely running conversation between Lynn Wettenhall and Fiona Steele talking about community food networks and how they can sort of evolve into sort of wider remits around food partnership working. Good comments also coming. Links, look at all the links in chat. Richard Perry talking about the UK food web, and also we've got Richard James McGowan talking about pivot projects. Pick on some of those links if you're interested. But questions, there are some great questions. If I can, I'm going to ask Joe Dunn to unmute and ask his question directly. Are you there, Joe? Joe Dunn, if possible. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here. I'm trying to remember what my question was. I put it right early on. It's basically what would the effect be on if you have an existing food partnership within a location, whether that's a town or a city, and then you're looking to at a more county level or a regional level, what effect would that have on your existing kind of food partnership status? And more importantly, looking at your kind of like award status, and what would that look like? What would that be?
Thanks, Joe. I'm going to suggest that Sarah, you maybe respond to that initially, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's quite a live discussion at the moment within sustainable food places, because we're noticing, as Hannah I think mentioned in her presentation, that there's quite a few places that have started off as cities and are now gradually evolving quite naturally really to start operating at a county level with the county council. So there's quite a few places that are sort of going through this process, and I think, you know, within the Sustainable Food Places core team there's a bit of a discussion going on at the moment about how that marries with the awards framework. And I noticed in Hannah's presentation she mentioned that I think she said Oxford are going for silver at the moment, and with a view to Oxfordshire achieving bronze at a later point. So it is a question of how we then dovetail those together. And I don't want to give an answer on that as a finite response, because we're still trying to work that through. It is quite complex because there are food partnerships springing up at different scales. And I think, you know, we're also going to be finding that there's food partnerships that are setting up at a district scale or a town scale as well. And we need to look at the same question again, I suppose, how we marry those different sort of memberships of sustainable food places and how we support that breadth of interest. I mean, I think it's important that we do come from where people are at and acknowledge that people want to organise at different scales. So it's a challenge for us within the Sustainable Food Places team, but it's an ongoing discussion. So watch this space and we'll try and give you some clarity going forwards.
Brilliant, thanks Sarah. There's another question, again possibly to you or anybody else, but maybe starting with you, from Richard Merrifield, which again was talking a little bit about scale and transitions from one scale to another. Richard Merrifield, are you there and happy to ask that question?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Sarah's partly answered it. So first off, thank you to all the presenters. They're fantastic presentations and really insightful, lots to reflect on. But yeah, my view is that in Devon we've got 8 districts and some are further ahead on the starting blocks than others. There's a really good food networks in Plymouth and in Exeter who've got some clear progress that's already been made. There'll be other places that perhaps haven't got such established networks around food, and food being such a broad agenda. We've heard today about sustainability and insecurity and healthy weight, and I guess there'll be districts that have different viewpoints on where they're going to put their limited resource around just those three agendas. How would you move from a district level network to a county level network where you've got those different key themes being a priority, and that county network then functioning to the benefit of all the districts?
Yes, diverse and difficult. I mean, I would say, I mean, coming from the county perspective, I think it's really important for county councils in particular to look at where they can add value to what's already happening at the district level, and to actually perhaps look internally initially to sort of see at a county level where are the areas of the food system that county councils have an influence over. So looking at the policies that are in place at a county council level, looking at how you can facilitate districts and local places to actually take action. So that might be a first step. But I agree. I mean, in terms of the actual programme, again, it is that challenge of how you connect very local scale action, where people might be organising on a town scale, with strategic policy at a county level. I think there's different ways of doing that. I mean, we've heard a little bit from in Leicestershire, for example, where they asked for expressions of interest from quite small scale towns within their districts. But I think, yeah, you will get a big variety. And like you say, there might be particular places that are really well organised and others that aren't. I guess it's just having a discussion. It all comes about just having that initial discussion and looking at where the gaps are and looking at whether there is an interest. And I think also making sure that the interest, you need to engage at a very senior level. So looking at the leader and the chief execs of district councils so that they've got buy-in at a very senior level, which then flows down to officer level below. That will make it a lot easier, I think.
Can I just check if any of the other speakers want to sort of come in on either of those two questions before we just wrap up a little bit of the chat?
Yeah, can I just briefly come in on what Richard was saying about the districts versus county thing? Because actually the way we started was that we were expecting Melton and Harborough to be looking at the whole food system. And so we started bringing partners together in collaboration with the councils to try and cover the whole thing. And it didn't work because actually there wasn't enough resource to look after the whole within such a small geography initially. I think what we've ended up with is that they pick the bits that make most sense to them initially. And then I suppose we sort of coalesce that all around the county. Longer term, hopefully, they'll work towards trying to tackle more of the different areas of the food system. But I think actually we've ended up in the place where Richard's describing, where you pick different localities are picking different bits, and then you sort of add it all up at the county level.
Thanks for that, Gavin. I'll mention a couple of other things that came in chat. Peter Aston has asked a question which has received a response from both Vera and Vera Zakharov and Ren Piercy from Sustain about how areas can link their food partnerships and networks to healthy weight partnerships. So there's some responses there already. As I say, keep an eye on chat. There's useful links there as well. Massive big question from Toby Matthews. What is a food partnership in one sentence? I did give you a little bit of warning, Sarah, but do you want to have a punt at that?
Well, this was actually answered in the chat, I think, by Ben Reynolds, and I've written almost identically to what Ben had shared, which was that it's a group of stakeholders who share a common vision for the future for transforming the food system in their area. There you go.
Mic drop. Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. There was a final question that just came in from Lindy Sharp. I don't know, Lindy, do you want to ask that question briefly? It is a big question, but if you want to unmute Lindy. Well, if not, Lindy was asking for where are there tools and resources where people can actually sort of make the case for this sort of work at partnership level, at county or regional level, in the way that we're talking about it? And I think that is a big question, but it's one of the things that Sustainable Food Places is trying to do, pull together some of the evidence that this works and show some of the approaches and mechanisms that can be employed to help strengthen those partnerships. That's a very brief response from me there. Do you want to add anything, Sarah?
No, I'm very aware of the time is 12:15, so I think there are a few people that are starting to have to leave. But are you happy to finish the questions there, Ben?
Yeah, let's leave it there. I've done my job as chat monkey. You carry on.
Okay, so I mean, I just wanted, as a final point, just to say, well, huge thanks to all the presenters. It's been really fascinating. That's the first time I've heard those presentations, and I'm desperate to make Tamsin's life 1,000 times easier somehow with the counties programme. So if you've got any ideas, ideas that you can share in the chat now, or email me later if it's time to leave. But send me messages about any support that you think, or any sort of issues that you think the counties programme should be tackling. You can write them in the chat now if you like, or like I said, sarah@foodmatters.org, and I'll be in touch with you for future workshops and webinars. And also, if you want to be on the mailing list for this going forward, do let me know, because I'm creating a mailing list where we'll be able to contact people with future events. So thanks for joining us. Okay.